Hello Sea Wolves and welcome back to the show. My brand new Sea Wolves sweater came in the mail yesterday. My old one, I'm actually sitting on it. I wore that during the ocean race. One of my favorite sweaters. I wore it like so many times and sailed so much in it, but it's now a bit like destroyed after 4 years of hard use. So I decided to get a new one also for the show. And I have to say, the quality is amazing. So not only is it a great way to support the channel, it's also nice to meet other wolves when you're walking around in the marina, you know, other people recognize you. So that's cool. I have to say the print is excellent. And yeah, if you order stuff, we have two stores. We have an EU store and a US store. And both work anywhere in the world, but it saves you a lot of time on the actual time that it takes to get there. So if you're in the EU, order in the EU store. If you're in the US, order in the US store. Otherwise, you have like a 2 weeks delivery time, I think. And much shorter if you get it in the right store. So just a good pointer there. Anyways, welcome back to the show. And today is, I would say, well, definitely one of the more interesting days in the race so far. Tactical decisions being made right now, and there is actually a lot at stake. And Boris made a great little video kind of about the situation. So let's take a look at what he had to say yesterday, and then we'll dive into it, and I'll try to really sort of paint a picture for you and show you why what is going on right now is so important, especially for the leaders, because more or less exactly what I talked about yesterday has happened. So we've seen the leader pack kind of split up a little bit with like 40-50 miles in between. The foilers kind of forming their own group behind. The race is really starting now. Let's listen to Boris, then we'll get back and we'll talk about some real important tactics that are going on right now. Take a look.
Hi everyone, we are out of the doldrums and going south. We don't have the same wind like the front pack yet. We have only 13 knots and they have 18. But we should get it soon, I hope, and then accelerate to similar speeds. We're averaging 15.5 knots. They are averaging 20, I think. So at the next update, I expect us to be at about 150 from the leader. As they extend, they get this wind earlier. But I can't complain. We got really nicely through the doldrums, and now it's an interesting situation for the next week. We have a nice low in the coming off from South America, on which we ride the South Atlantic to Cape Town in record time. Only if I make my polar at 100% or close to 100%. If I go at 90%, I miss that low. That will be in about 5-6 days from now, when it would be clear, and then I would be losing 1,200 miles to those who make it with the low. So a big potential split could happen then in the race, which makes it important to now find the speed, find the wind, get going. And the good side of the story is if I manage to stay with this low, the others can't get much ahead, because ahead of the low is a high pressure ridge end of then next week, and so they can't jump a system ahead of them. But this system we need to get if it materializes and if the others get it.
Oh my gosh, I almost forgot. You're probably at home going, hey, what happened to the toast here? Sorry. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Cheers, wolves. So, what is Boris talking about exactly? The fact that he is running his boat at 100% of polar. That's kind of the first thing what he starts with. And what that means is, well, I have a whole video explaining all of the details of like what a polar is and how it works, and kind of like, you know, if you want to really like dive very deep into that, check out the video here, link below also in the description. It's an hour-long video where I explain all of the details about that. Very interesting to know, actually, really heightens your experience of the overall race. In short, all of the boats, every boat, but every IMOCA has its kind of performance schema. So that means that depending on the wind, there's always like a maximum speed or an optimal speed, theoretically speaking, that the boat can go. So you can, and this is translated by the autopilots and the plotter systems. So like I even have it on my boat now, where you get a percentage. So if I'm running like the boat in a very low wind speed, but I got my full sails up and everything, and I just reach the maximum potential speed of my boat, the Polar will read that I'm sailing at 100%. So then I know for sure that there's basically nothing I could do to go any faster, because even if I'm not going at like full speed, maybe I'm doing only 4 knots in like very low wind, but the performance sort of system in my boat tells me, no, you're doing really good right now, because for the situation, you are going at the absolute optimal possible speed. So what Boris is saying is that he is pushing his boat to the absolute maximum. And why? Because the leading foilers, so that means Charlie and the guys that are like out in front, are heading for a local low that is coming up over Brazil. I'll show you what it looks like in a minute here. And if they catch that particular wind system, which is a rotating, moving wind system that is actually going towards the Southern Ocean and then into the Southern Ocean, if they can catch that system, but if Boris and say this also goes for Pip and a few of the others who are kind of in that slightly secondary foiler group, if they miss that connection, it's like a bus that's going. So if they miss that bus, then that will likely instantly translate itself into maybe 1,000 miles of distance between the leaders and the second group, because the second bus is coming, you know, an hour later or a day later, which means that those leading foilers are going to be in very good strong wind, foiling away at 25 or maybe more knots, while they have to wait literally for the next kind of wind system to come along. And that can be a day, day and a half, maybe even 2 days before they have like a good connection again. So it's very important now, it's of utmost tactical importance, especially for the foilers. So the non-foilers are already a little bit like they're just not going to make it to the bus, it's theoretically impossible. But for Boris, Pip, there's a few others in this group. There is Benjamin Dutroux, there's Roman Atanasio, Clarice Kramer, Samantha Davis. They're all kind of making up this like slightly secondary group. I talked about yesterday that there would probably, because of how the wind was situated, that there's going to be a bit of a gap. So that came exactly true. And well, let me show you what I mean with this particular system that everybody is like scrambling now to get into, and why everybody is just pushing their boats to the absolute maximum in order to get in there. How to best show you this? Let's go to windy here, and I've set it now not to wind, but what you're looking here is pressure, and so that's almost the same but not quite. So if you switch to wind again, you can see that it kind of follows that particular area, but not exactly. And so what is pressure? Well, in essence, it just means like, is there a big stack of air or a low stack of air? Because air, the amount of air along the Earth's surface balances itself, just like water in a lake. You know, if there's no wind, it's going to at some point get still. And the entire air, sort of sea of air that we're kind of living in, it also has waves, right? So on the top of the air sea that we all live in, there are currents and waves and things going on because of the astral, you know, the space wind that Earth is kind of rotating through. And so we get waves that are like higher and we get points that are lower. Now, when you get a high point, so a good example of that is this big like red area that you can see here sort of off of the coast of South America. That means that there's kind of like a mountain or like a big high point in the air. That's why we call it high pressure. And when there's a high point, that means that the air is going to try to balance itself out again with the surrounding lower area. So the air will flow from that high point to the lower point. Now, obviously, in the high point itself, there's not going to be any wind, because that's kind of what happens in high points. The wind will be around that point, but there's no air that can go into that higher point. So in the high pressure itself, there's no wind. That's why there's no wind in high pressure areas. And you can see around this point that high pressures on Earth, or on the lower hemisphere anyway, create a counterclockwise spin. On the higher atmosphere, it's all the opposite way around. But here they create a counterclockwise flow of the air kind of flowing away from that high point. The opposite of that is the low pressure area. You can see them kind of in blue, so you can see a similar swirl here. But it's going clockwise, and that means that there's a low, there's like a dimple, there's like a lower point, lower amount of air there, which means that the surrounding more air flows towards that point, which is wind. And so you can see a clear sort of distinction here between kind of the warmer region and the colder polar region. As you can see this big orange kind of line that goes, basically throughout the entire planet like this. So this is really the boundary of the hotter air and the warmer air. And on both sides of that, we get a lot of these swirls. So if you want to take a different look at it through time, we see that these swirls, because of the way the Earth rotates, they always go from west to east. So they're always kind of floating around the world in the same direction. If we look at it here, for example, so this is kind of Antarctica from the bottom up. Now I can't fast forward this in time, but you can see those wind areas in the same, and they kind of go like this. So they literally keep circling around the world in that direction. The goal that the skippers are aiming for now is to insert themselves into one of those swirls and hopefully, possibly, ride it all around the world. Because theoretically, these swirls, they move around at a certain speed, usually around 30 knots or so. And so the IMOCAs are designed with their speeds that are like between like 25 and 35 knots averages now, the foiling boats at least, that they would theoretically be able to keep up with one of those systems. And if the system itself doesn't collapse, so these systems often they kind of spontaneously get created and they also collapse again. So you can ride them for sometimes a few days, sometimes a few weeks even, but eventually they will dissolve. But theoretically, if you could find one that doesn't dissolve and goes all around the world, you could insert yourself into that system and then ride it all around the world and exit again in one time. Now, during the VendeeGlobe race, they're usually going to be using 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 of these systems. So they'll get into one, they'll ride it for a few days. If they can keep up with it, usually it will dissolve after a few days and they kind of lose it. Or sometimes if they don't keep up with it, they will kind of like fall out of the end of it and then have to wait for the next one to ride there. So there are different ways how they can go, but that's the idea. And so now everything tactically is about who inserts himself into that first swirl first, because that's kind of the bus that I was talking about. And if you get on the bus, you can get, make a real gain and get a real lead in the race. But if you miss the first bus while everybody else is getting on there, you're instantly going to be left behind in the race, and you could get like a gap of like 1,000 miles between you and the rest. So the picture right now, and it's kind of interesting to actually look at it here through the pressure areas, which doesn't exactly correspond to the wind, but it's a good picture to look at. So the sailors right now are kind of here in this area, and of course there's a few more stragglers that are a bit more behind, but that's kind of their rough area. So what they want to do is they want to take a course that goes roughly kind of here along this line, because that's where the wind goes in the right direction. Could also be a little bit more like here if they think that's faster, but that's the rough path that they're going to be taking. And then they're going to insert themselves into the Southern Ocean. And somewhere here we have also the ice exclusion line. So that's a line that they cannot go below because there's icebergs and other threats there. So that's something that the race has just forbidden them to go. That's what they want to do. Now let's look at time. So this is the moment now. Now right now they're still sort of near South America, but you can kind of see the course line that I drawn here. If we start to fast forward the time, so 24 hours, not so interesting yet. But on Sunday, let me delete the lines here again, you can see this first sort of swirl that starts to kind of come up here. Yeah, so that's a local low pressure, kind of off of the coast of like Brazil, Argentina, somewhere in that region, which is likely going to move down, right? So that's going to create some wind. And I don't think that they'll be able to, from where they are now, in 2 days be able to kind of reach the core of this and really ride it sort of from here and keep riding it. But very likely they'll be able to kind of insert themselves here somewhere on the back and start to ride those winds down. And then, and that's kind of what Boris is talking about, if we go into Monday, we see that that system going from west to east as always starts to really make its way nicely through the warmer air, dipping down, and at the same time you can see that there's this other system here. It's actually two of them. There's a little core here and a little core here, are coming up kind of from the bottom, and that's the system that they're really aiming for. So this bubble here is very likely, I haven't seen this yet actually, but it's very likely going to collide with these other two and form one system, and that's a system that they could get at. So this is 4 or 5 days ago, so that's probably within reach. They should be able to kind of connect to that somewhere, so that's a bit already riding the bus. But then, yeah, so you see that moving down, so boom, here we go. So that's Wednesday, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days from now. So that's what Boris is talking about, this particular situation. Let me delete the lines here again so we can see a bit better. So here is a kind of a clash where we see these two cold systems, one dipping into the other. Oh, let me zoom out here a little bit more again to get a nice clear picture. And if they can make it, you know, sort of across with the help of this little bubble kind of through this line, to get themselves somewhere here in along this band here inside of this system, then if we start to fast forward time now, you will see that that will probably keep going down, yeah? So that keeps going, and starts to move, because now it's kind of moved here, right? Starts to move, and we have another one here behind there also. And so one of these two, perhaps this first one is like still going to be just out of reach, like just too far. But this one here, so that's 7 days away, is a nice big one also coming up. That is definitely a system that if they keep full bar going down, sailing down now, they could make it in there. And once that passes, you can see that there's a pretty big orange kind of blob in between there before the next one here starts to form again. So you can see very clearly, very beautifully, these three kind of systems, the first one, the second one, and the third one. You can see the next one also coming here already on the other side. That's also going to come through. All of these are a bit like buses. So that's kind of the schedule of buses. And everything now is about which bus are you going to get on. So we're looking at a picture, this is next weekend, next Saturday. So there's more than 7 days from now. And so I think that most likely, well, this particular bus is still sort of out of reach. It's too far, it's too fast. But this one, with some luck, because that's literally a week from now, they could be in. So this is where the leader, so the head foilers, could be in this particular system next week, and then they could start riding that around the world for as long as that system kind of stays, and that can help them a ways into the race. Whilst if you miss that, well, that is about the distance of almost half the Atlantic Ocean between one system and the next. So if that little second group of the foilers manages to just miss the first bus, they're instantly going to have to kind of wait to get on the second bus, which means that the distance between the first group and the second group is going to grow kind of by that much, which makes the tactical moment and the pressure now on the skippers, especially in that second little foiler group, to just absolutely put the pedal to the metal, to stay close enough with that first group that if they actually manage to hit this particular system, and again, it's a prediction many days away. So there is inherently quite a lot of unreliability in there, and the system could collapse still, it could still go quite different. But if the front group hooks into that system, then that sort of the second intermediate group definitely wants to hook into it also, because if the first group miss it and they miss it, well, then they're all going to be together in the second system, and that's where the fight is going to be. But if Charlie and kind of the guys around him and girls make it into that first bus and the rest misses it, well, then they're going to have a major advantage for the rest of the race. So that's kind of what everything is about right now. So yeah, hope that gave you a little bit more insight into everything that's going on. Going to be very interesting to see how that's going to progress and what kind of risks the skippers are going to be willing to take over the next few days. So let's hope nothing breaks down. But this is the moment for them to go and really push the boat hard to get on that first boss. So yeah, that's it for the update today. Hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, join the Sea Wolves yourself, of course, at home. And I wish you an incredibly great weekend and see you again in 24 hours. Ciao, ciao.